a process note on this sermon. I've created some slides, and some of them have a lot of wind in the background. In some ways, maybe it's more appropriate for Pentecost than for this angel-filled season that we're about to enter. But I've decided to keep them anyway, and I've put in some title cards to help you understand what I was trying to say if the wind hadn't drowned me out. And in terms of accessibility, it might be a great idea to always have these kinds of title cards for those of us who don't hear so well. So it's a different kind of experiment with the kind of sermon that I started creating for Pentecost. And I hope it works for you. I think it's a worthy experiment. And I do realize as a creator that I become too in love with much of my creation as I'm doing these sermons. I think that's a great metaphor for God, too. We worship a God who is in love with us, who loves us, who doesn't want to discard us just because the background is a little windy. So here is my meditation on Elizabeth. Elizabeth, who is very old, but nonetheless pregnant. Soon we enter the season of Advent, which will culminate in Christmas. There are people who are not present at this manger, and some are present who probably weren't at the manger. Today, let us go back. Let us look at Elizabeth, Jesus' aunt, according to the story in Luke. Or maybe Elizabeth wasn't the aunt of Jesus, in the way we think of aunts and uncles. Most translations say that Elizabeth is the kinswoman of Mary. We know that Elizabeth becomes pregnant after she is very old and goes into seclusion. And we know that Mary, who is young, becomes pregnant, and she also needs to go into seclusion, so she comes to her kinswoman Elizabeth, where they can both have a time of retreat, where they can both focus on their pregnancies and preparing for what God has chosen them to do. In a season of angel sightings, Elizabeth does not have an angel who appears to her. Remember the days when you were a sleek kayak, able to dart and twist along the water, able to go where few others could go. But those days are not these days. Now you feel like you are a barnacle-encrusted boat, a small craft, punched at the bottom. Not much use as a boat, not much use for anything else. Maybe you feel like that submerged boat, the one that's dragging down the other boat. Maybe you wonder what would happen if you were both cut free. Maybe you feel like an old house, abandoned, windows gated up, shrubbery dying in the front. No curb appeal. That sums up your life. Maybe you feel like a weird wooden flamingo in a land where everyone else is a sleek bird of prey, up above, flying, untouchable, while you are here, rooted in a rotting earth. You don't see yourself as a home for something new. You don't see yourself as fertile ground for something that God is in the process of creating. Even the spider webs are hardly holding on. Some ships have a fancy retirement. They get to put their feet up. They get to enjoy being an ornament of a different sort. you fear that this is not what you will face. I am a little uncomfortable with all the imagery of children late in life, with the suggestion that the sole way that a woman can be fruitful and be a part of God's plan is to have a baby. So let us think about some other images of fruitfulness, some other images that may feel more inclusive. Maybe the image of an orchid that has been in flower in various forms since July. Far from being the finicky flower that we might have expected, it blooms, and then when it's done, it blooms some more. But even this imagery is a little too close to birth imagery for me to be really comfortable. What are some other images of how God might find us and use us in the fulfilling of a new creation? Maybe a better image for our time is the image of books that are waiting to be written, the image of voices that have yet to be heard, the image of ideas that only we can bring forth. Once this was an old tennis court that no one ever used. Now it is a construction site. Soon it will be a new home. New life bubbles forth. Places where you might not ever expect to find new life. Maybe you are the one who keeps watch. Even the most unlikely homes can provide shelter, especially shelter to those who need it most. The shelter that Elizabeth offered to Mary, the retreat that gave them time to incubate what God proclaimed possible. But look and see, a small coconut, so tiny, so fragile. And out of that, much larger trees can grow. Hear the good news. Our triune God has a greater vision than we do, a greater imagination, a larger toolbox, a bigger canvas, a place for all of us in the great creation.